Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Judy Simpson, and thanks for joining us. This is a great time of year to catch up on your reading. If you're a gardener, there are lots of excellent books that can help you with whatever you're interested in. And even if you're not an avid gardener, you may have an interest in books about houseplants or other horticultural endeavors. Our guest this afternoon has been catching up on some of his reading. UVM Extension horticulturalist Leonard Perry joins us to share some of his favorite gardening books and resources. Welcome back.
Thanks again, Judy.
I bet you have quite the library.
I do. I think at last count it was somewhere over 800 different books. I kind of have a weakness over the years for garden books, whether they be old or new, and so I thought I'd just bring a few samples today of some of my favorite references. I just enjoy looking through these. I know I use a lot of people go online for information, but there's still just so much in these books that you can gather.
Well, this one caught my eye. It's about tomatoes, if you can believe that, and it's not just pictures of tomatoes, it's portraits of tomatoes.
Definitely portraits. This is by Amy Goldman, who in her author who in the Hudson Valley, New York, grows hundreds of heirloom. These are old antique varieties of tomatoes. Some of the best are in here. Just some incredible photographs in there. Take a look at some of those. It's just almost sensual, some of these photographs. But you know, talking about some of these, and here's a sampling of just some of the many types of heirlooms you can get. And after the beginning that talks a bit about the types of tomatoes, the growth habits and leaves, then it gets into the varieties. This is one that I actually grow. It's called Juan Flam, or Flam is the name it shows there. Beautiful pictures of these, but also some description about growing them, any specifics on traits, using them, and where they come from. In fact, this was the name like that, or the jaune, or in the French, referring to the color, kind of an orangey yellow, a small tomato. But as the book says, this tomato can do no wrong. Use it for anything. So this is just a great one that I've had good luck with, and this was, as I mentioned, bred in France, but actually introduced in the late 90s by a Tomato Supply, which is one of my sources for just hundreds of different tomatoes. I don't grow that many, though. And then, of course, and you can't have a book on tomatoes without recipes, and so the whole back of the book is all about different recipes. This is one I use. It's very simple. It's roasted tomatoes. You just cut them in half, put them skin side down on a tray to roast, drizzle them with some olive oil and garlic, if you will, and salt. Just roast them for a few minutes, and then you can eat them fresh. You can freeze them, have them later. It's just great. So just a lot in that book. It's just a fun one, a good coffee table type book.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So then another one going along with the vegetable theme, a lot of people are growing vegetables now, is another one. I brought 3 Bibles today. Okay. And this is the first Bible, if you will, the Vegetable Gardener's Bible. These are from Story Publishing. And Ed Smith is the author in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, grows quite a vegetable garden, so a lot of very practical information for our climate. This is actually one of the texts I use in my course. Beginners or more experienced can learn from this book. Begins with, of course, ways to garden and culture, and then, you know, has illustrations and all this, steps and various stages. Things like reading a seed packet label, you know, what do all those terms mean on there, those abbreviations, and so that's very useful information. And then, of course, the A to Z of the plants, fennel on the left here, garlic on the right, showing the different types of garlic. The box there has very key information you need. You can look real quick about sowing and growing, but it talks about how to, you know, select varieties and how to plant them, and then has varieties at the end, you know, how to harvest and store. Here it's showing about harvesting garlic. A little tip on the left there about actually cutting off on the hardneck types, those curly parts, you can eat those, but that helps the bulb develop better. So just a lot of great information on growing vegetables.
All in one book.
All in one book, yeah.
Excellent. And I know you have another book that you wanted to take a look at. You've got some suggestions on garden design and planting. Right.
Well, to kind of change gears a bit now and get into some of the other aspects, garden design, we have one that I was fortunate to visit with Joe Eck, a garden designer in southern Vermont, and so we did an interview with him on one of his books, which I found just very fascinating. It talks of his approach to design. It's very readable, a lot of very interesting philosophy too.
Let's take a look at that.
Joe Eck's Elements of Garden Design puts philosophy into practice. As a renowned garden designer, Eck shares his views on how to think about what makes a garden aesthetically pleasing, and then how to translate those thoughts into action.
It's not about plants, and it's not about their culture, and it's not even about the pleasures of growing them and living with them. It's about how you use plants and other things, inert materials, stone, for instance, to fashion a garden. So it's really a book of philosophy more than a practical manual.
Okay, so it's not a how-to, step-by-step go about design. It's more how to think about it.
Though it's full of opinion, I do allow myself to say that this design might be more pleasing than this other, and I do look at all the various problems and components that go into making a garden. I think it has a practical purpose, but its first thrust is to get the reader to think about how gardens are fashioned.
What are some of these elements?
One is the concept of frame. In other words, how is a garden enclosed or set off? And that involves usually the defining of the garden's perimeter, its external space, and then its subdivision inside into rooms or chambers devoted to different purposes or different flowers, different seasons, all kinds of effects which you want to isolate and experience then in sequence as you move through the garden. Another element is that whole question of movement or access. How do you get from here to there? And what does that experience feel like? How do you practically fashion it? And what are the psychological consequences of it? Other sections are about the roles that large masses play in the shaping of a garden. Obviously, conifers have a tremendous presence and authority. How they're deployed, how one conifer relates to another, is very important in the overall effect and the final success or lack of success of the garden.
That's a beautiful overview of garden design. What about growing flowers and combining them? What do you suggest for people?
Okay, brought one along that does give some of those nuts and bolts, not just philosophy. The Flower Gardener's Bible, and first edition came out, Lewis and Nancy Hill. You can see on the cover of that, and then this year a new edition's been released, the 10th anniversary, basically the same information, just a lot of great information on various aspects. Here we have transplanting, well illustrated. Then another part of the book has garden designs for many types of gardens in the center part. You see a little inset there. It's kind of like a map. It shows you what each of those flowers is, and then talks about some of the different flowers in the back part. You've got an A to Z, and for each one of those, it just, annuals, perennials, even some vines, culture, suggested varieties, even plants you can put together. So just again, all in one book, our second Bible here that's great for flower growers.
Now, viewers may recall your visit with another well-known landscape designer. She now lives in southern Vermont, and she's also an author. Let's take a look at your interview with Julie Moyer-Meservy in her latest book.
Okay. Well, Julie, your latest book, Home Outside, could you tell us what that actually means?
Home is not just the house that you live in. The first thing you see when you come home at night is your landscape. The last thing you leave is your property, your landscape. So home outside is as important as home inside. And this book is really about how do you create home for your whole property.
So is that about the design, or how do you think about it as a living space?
Well, it's that too, but it's about how do you think about the design of the whole property. And that's what my 6 steps that I take you through are really referring to. I talk about comfort zones in the middle of the book, about this welcoming zone, and the neighboring zone where the side yard, and the living zone in the back. And take that apart, and so that you have certain principles that you want to think about upholding in each of those different zones around your house. The whole idea of this book was everything needs to be doable in it. There are a few little bit higher end ones that people can't do, but most of the projects are small. They're small sized houses, they're small sized lots, and they're doable. And I wanted people to feel confident that they too could design their own home landscapes.
So it sounds like you've gone through your process with your 6 steps that people can follow.
Yes.
But also it sounds like a lot of case studies that people can get ideas.
Case studies as well as befores and afters. I love seeing where something started and how it really can transform with not too much work. Yeah,
Great.
So it's lots of fun. There's also all sorts of other things in there that are fun. Really great photographs from all over the country, Canada, even a little bit of Europe is in there, showing people you know, how to do the things that I talk about in the simplest possible language with great photographs.
I know a lot of times I'll see these and people may think, well, that's somewhere else. I can't do that because that's in Europe or wherever. But I know a lot of times you can get the ideas. It may be, yeah, maybe not the same plants, but the same idea about using colors and textures and things.
There are great ideas everywhere, and people are all living lives in the same kind of way. So you're going to find principles and patterns that are useful no matter where they are. So hopefully the book will do that for you.
All right, and you wanted to mention Perennials too.
Perennials, we've got to mention Perennials. So popular. This is one of my favorites. Stephanie Cohen, we've had on the show before. Just a lot of great information in this, very readable. She's a horticulturist, she and Nancy Andra. So just a lot of great information there. A lot of beautiful inspirational pictures, as you see with the roses and the ornamental grasses here. Again, lots of different design ideas, like along a walk here in the sun, a map. It shows a beautiful diagram with the plants on it, and then descriptions of the plants and design tips as well. So just a whole lot in this book that you can find. I'll use it in one of my design courses.
All right, what about trees and shrubs?
Trees and shrubs, we can't forget those. There are just so many good ones. I like
know.
this one. This is growing trees and shrubs and small trees in cold climates from a group of authors in Minnesota, horticulturists. Again, for our climate, it's great. A little bit in the beginning, a lot at the end about general aspects from everything from propagation to planting to transplanting, but mainly an A to Z. This is the shad bush at Amelanchier, showing it at different times of the year. Lists of varieties, specifics for each plant on growing. It's just great stuff. And there are even a few plants like peonies in their flower. We think of as perennials, but showing the different types of those too. So just another good reference book.
And your next book too is inspiring because of the pictures.
Right. We have another one that we actually visited with Gordon Hayward, and we'll visit that in a minute. But this one, The Gardens of Beautiful America, is another one that's just, to me, just a coffee table book. And there's just, this is actually based on lantern slides from 100 years ago, and the author actually found these, worked with the Library of Congress. They were taken black and white as on the left, and on the right they were hand colored. So all these pictures, over 250 in this book, of the 1,100 or so, this rose garden here, for instance. And this is actually at Fort Ticonderoga. This was a Pell home back in the heyday when it was planted up. And then here we have a formal garden in New York. So again, just some beautiful pictures.
Very different. Yeah, I like that. Well, there's another Vermont author that Leonard had the opportunity to visit with. The author has his own approach to garden design, along with lots more great photographs.
Well, I'm trying to do two things in this book for the home gardener. The first is to make this mysterious world of garden design far less mysterious, to make it very practical and approachable. And then number two, I'm trying to help them use those practical design ideas to solve niggling problems around the house. That is, how to deal with the bulkhead, the electric meter box, the air conditioning units, or the dryer vent coming out of the side of the house. That is, I'm trying to walk people around their house as we go through the book, from the front of the house to the sides of the house, the back of the house, around a garden shed or spaces between buildings, and how to use those buildings to help people come up with garden design ideas.
I understand, Gordon, this book has a Vermont connection.
The cover photograph is of Mary Azarian's garden. Richard Brown, who's a garden photographer from Barnett, took the cover photograph and many images inside the book. John Barstow, my editor, and I met at his office up in Middlebury as we were developing the book, and Janet Fredericks from Lincoln, who is an artist, did all the illustrations.
I understand this also won an award, it looks like, on the cover.
The American Horticultural Society chose it as one of their top 5 books for 2004.
We can talk about your third Bible.
The third Bible, the Fruit Gardener's Bible, one I had the privilege of working on this last year. Mentioned it before, but brought a few pictures along just to show different stages of ripening of fruits. Blueberries, it starts off with small fruits, goes to tree fruits, covers diseases such as scab on apples, so you see all the problems, as well as a culture. One of the small fruits, strawberries, depth of planting, the one in the middle being just right, not too high or not too low. So just showing all the different kinds of pictures and things that we can look at in the garden.
What a great selection of books. Thanks for bringing those in, but of course people can also find out more from your website.
Exactly. On perennials.info, I've got a list of all these books if you didn't catch all the titles.
All right, well, thanks so much for joining us today,
Thank
Leonard.
you.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.